Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another tutorial in our Java programming tutorial series. And in this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to work with dates and times using the Java 8 DateTime API. Now, why am I going through the more modern Java 8 version of dealing with dates and times when Java had a method of dealing with that sort of stuff beforehand? Well, the reason is because before Java 8, the java.util.date stuff wasn't very good. There were lots of drawbacks, and in Java 8, they implemented the new API to fix those things and to provide much more utility methods to do a bunch of common tasks when you're dealing with dates and times and time zones and all that sort of stuff. Now, I mentioned that there's drawbacks to the previous way of doing the dates and times. What were those drawbacks exactly? Well, one of them is that it was not thread safe. It was also very poorly designed. It's kind of important to have a well-designed system of doing something as important as working with dates, and the previous way of doing it wasn't very well designed. And another major thing that it had wrong with it was that working with time zones was very, very difficult. But in the newer DateTime API that was introduced in Java 8, and I know it was Java 8 this time, I checked, it makes things a lot easier, and those drawbacks aren't necessarily present here. So, the first thing I want to show you is LocalDateTime and how you can get that local date and the time where you're at. So, how do you do that? Well, we need to use the LocalDateTime class, and we'll call this DateTime, and we'll set it equal to LocalDateTime.now. This gets the current date and time. Now, what happens? What happens if I want to instantiate an object using the new keyword and all that stuff, like we have been doing with everything else? Well, let's find out. So local date time 2 is set it equal to a new local date. Now you can see we get a red squiggly line because local date. Oh, I didn't put local date time. Okay. Now you can see the entire constructor line part of it is underlined, and this is because the constructor of local date time and the empty constructor is undefined because there isn't one. So we need to add arguments to it. And what do these represent? Well, we can go ahead and go into the LocalDateTime class. And if you don't have the docs attached, it can do this, but that's fine. All right, so we should just then be able to hover over it, and it'll give us an error. If I can find my cursor. So you hover over it. It says the constructor local date time. It gives you a local date, local time is not visible. So this constructor requires a local date and a local time to work, and you can't really do anything with this constructor because it's private. So that's why we have to do LocalDateTime.now, because that returns a LocalDateTime object that we can then assign to our own LocalDateTime objects that we can then use and manipulate. So that's how that works. And we can print this by going system.out.println date time. And so let's go ahead and save and run this. So run it. And you can see here we get this long-winded thing here in our console. It's not super long, but it's pretty long-winded. So let me explain to you what this is. So this is a string representation of what the date is and what the time is. So it says here it's 2021 is the year, 03 is the month, and then 07 is the day. So the date is formatted in a year, month, day format. And then then there's an uppercase T telling you, okay, now we're at the time portion. And it's giving us 18:05:10.750. Now, what does this represent? Well, 18 is the hour, and the hour goes by a 24-hour sort of thing, so it goes by military time. 05 is the minute, 10 is the seconds, and then the number after the decimal is milliseconds. So if you just want the time part of it, there's a LocalTime object for that, and then if you just want the date, there's a LocalDate object for that as well. But if you want both, you can go ahead and just use LocalDateTime and call it good. So with the LocalDateTime, LocalDate, LocalTime, there's a lot of helper methods that will help you do a lot of different things. So let's say date time dot, and now you can see we got a whole bunch of stuff here. You can adjust into, and then you can say you can provide it a temporal, which this will what this method does is it basically just adjusts the specified temporal object to have the same date and time as your LocalDateTime object. There's an @zone method, which you provide a zone ID, which is your time zone. You can compare different chrono local date times, which is basically the same as your local date time. You can do all kinds of stuff. You can format it. You can do a whole lot of things. Like you can get what day of the month it is. If you need that specifically extracted as an integer, you can do that. You can get what day of the week it is, and that returns a day of week object, which you can then extract from that object. You can get the day of the week as an integer. You can get the hour. You can get the minute of what time it is. You can get the month as a month object, which you can then extract a string representation of. You can also extract the month value, so what month it is numerically. You can get nanoseconds. You can get the year. You can do a lot of different stuff. I'm going to show you just a couple things. So we showed you how LocalDateTime works a little bit. LocalDate and LocalTime work exactly the same way. LocalDateTime just combines everything from both classes into one, pretty much. And we're just gonna kind of show you. I'm gonna show you each LocalDate and LocalTime individually. So LocalDate, I'm gonna say date equals LocalDate dot now, and then we have LocalTime time equals LocalTime dot now, just like that. So now we have our own objects for this, and we can go ahead and import that. What error am I getting here? Just the yellow line. Okay. Because it's not being used anywhere. Okay, so let's say we want to have our date formatted a specific way, like month/day/year. Well, first things first is we need to extract those components ourselves. And we can do that by saying int month is equal to date dot, and then we want to extract the month from this. So we can say get month, and we have two options. We have the month, which returns a month object, the get month, which returns a month, and then we have get month value, which returns the integer value of the month. This is what we need because it's an integer, and get month value returns an integer. But you can do that. You can do that with the get month as well. Just have a switch statement for that. But it's much more efficient to get month value. And then we can get day, so whatever the day is, which is date dot get day of month. And we have a few different options here. Get day of month, which returns an int. We can get the day of the year, which is also an integer. And then we can get the day of the week as an integer, as a day of week value, I should say. So we'll just say get day of month because that's what we want. And now we want the years. So integer year is equal to date dot get year. That gets the year as an integer. All right, cool. Now let's say we want the time as well. So we can do that by saying int, and we'll say hour is equal to date. Well, actually, we want hour civilian equals date dot we want to get, well, not date, we want time dot get hour, which returns an int. And this, remember, it's usually military time, right? So hour, I guess we'll just say hour because we want to make it easier on ourselves. So we have get hour set assigned to the hour variable. Then we create another variable for minute, and we say time dot get minute, and int we want this to be, you may want the seconds, you might not. In this case, I'm just going to say no, we don't want the seconds, because we want this to be readable to the user. The user typically doesn't want seconds in their time, right? So let's go ahead now, and we'll say, I'm going to create a method called private void get date and time. We'll get current date and time, I guess. Okay. So with that, we'll need int month, int day, int year, int hour, int minute, int, well, not even an int seconds, so we just have those 5 different parameters. And so with that, we can then say if minute, we're going to say if the minute, well, not even the minute, if hour is greater than 13, well, greater than or equal to 13, and then if it's not, because we want to output this as civilian time rather than military. So if it is, we then want to say system out print line the current date is, and then we'll say month plus slash plus day plus another slash and then a year. Now we could also do this a little bit differently if you so desired, and the way we can do that is by using printf. So let's actually go about doing it that way. So printf will say the current date is percent %d slash %d slash %d and then we want to have the first one be the month, the second one be the day, and then the third one be the year. And in fact, because this never is, because the date isn't dependent on the time, we can go ahead and move this out of the if statement, because we don't want to duplicate that line multiple times when there's nothing to change. However, the time does depend on the given value of the hour, whether it's AM or PM. So we can say system.out.printf An hour minus 12 minutes. And then we'll say the current time is %d colon %d, and then if it's greater than or equal to 13, we'll say PM. Otherwise, it should be AM. Cool, cool. So now, let's make sure that we have a new line at the end of that for the date. And with that, we can go back up to our main method here, and we will call get current date and time, and we can just pass in month, day, year, hour, minutes, just like that. Cool, cool. And so now we can go ahead and run the code. And we have an error somewhere. Where is that error at? Well, get current date and time. Did I might have misspelled it. I don't know, but hey. So now we can just go ahead and run it, save it. And you can see we get our output of the current date is, and then 3/7/2021, and then we get our current time, which is 6:21 p.m., which is in fact accurate. So that's how you can that's how you can get each component and format the date and time properly in a little bit more nicer of a little bit nicer fashion. Pretty cool. It really helps when you need to display the date and time to the user, and you don't want to have to deal with a bunch of complex date management, which in a lot of other languages you have to do a lot of advanced and really annoying date stuff. If you're like in JavaScript, for example, it's not fun, nor is it super easy to do. Right. So the next thing that I want to cover is how you can go about adding and subtracting a certain amount of times using chrono units, because that's another thing that you're often going to have to do is add and subtract dates from each other, sometimes even times from one another to get a date in the future or in the past, or a time in the future or in the past. There are multiple different chrono units you can use for this, and we have some special methods for that. So let's say we want to know what the date will be 1,000 days from now. Or something of that nature. We can say local date, we'll call it future date, is equal to, and we'll say date dot, and then we can minus it, we can plus, There's many different options. You can convert it to you can convert it to a string representation, to an epoch day, which is a long. You can do a range. There's all kinds of stuff. But what we are looking for is we need to plus, and you can see there's many different ways that you can go about it. You can say, oh, we want to add a certain amount of years, so we say the plus year, plus weeks to go weeks, plus months for months, plus days for days. Then we have plus and another plus. One uses a temporal amount. The other one uses a long, as well as a chrono unit or temporal unit. So we'll go with the second option. Let's say we want to know what the date will be in 365,365 years. Or not even years, but days. So 365 and then 365. And then here we give our chrono unit. So we want chrono unit dot, and then we have a bunch of them here. We have centuries, days, decades, eras, forever, half days, hours, microseconds, I believe, milliseconds, millennia, milliseconds, minutes, nanoseconds, seconds, weeks, years, all kinds of things. We want days, so chrono unit dot days. And so with that, we can then go ahead and say system out print line, or printf, I guess, to make it a little bit easier on myself. We want to have future date right, so boom, just like that. And then we'll say future date dot get month value, future date dot get day, get day of month, and then future date dot get year, just like that. And with that, we can then go ahead and run this. We can then save it, and we get our output in 365,365 days. The date will be July 8th, 3021. So I think that's pretty interesting. You can also minus days. So we'll say minus, and we'll see what the date was that long ago. So whatever the date was, 365,365 days ago. So we can save that and we can run it. And you can see the date was November 5th, 1020, which is a long time ago. Very, very long time ago. So that's something. If you don't want to use the chrono units, you absolutely do not have to. You can if you want. It's really up to you. Just for the heck of it, let's see what the date will be after this many half days, right? So this many half days, what will the date be? We save it and we run it. And you can see we get an exception. And what exception did it throw? It threw an unsupported temporal type exception. So that's not going to work necessarily here, which is fine. We can say months. How many? What will the date be after this many months? Well, let's go ahead and run this and save it and stuff. You can see when you go and minus that many months, that's what the date will be. It's kind of funky. So let's go ahead and say, oh, we want to plus that many months. What happens if we plus that many months? So we save it and we run it, and we can see that that's what's going to happen here. Pretty cool. Now, again, you don't have to do the chrono unit if you don't want to. This also applies to LocalTime as well. So if we go LocalTime and we say time.plus, and we say, oh, whatever the months are. Well, we don't have to do that. We can say chrono unit dot, and we'll say hours. Let's say hours. So we save it and we run it. We get an error. What is this error? So we'll say, yeah, okay. So what it's doing is it's saying, oh, you're trying to use methods from LocalDate. So we'll say get hour get minutes, and then we will do it that way, where we then do that. And we'll actually just go about printing the time, or the future date, because, well, if we just do the time components, it's not going to tell us much of anything. So we'll say we want to print future date. Okay, we save it and we run it. So go ahead and run it, save it. And this is what our future date, or rather our future time would be. 7:34:24. Now, if we were to do a local date time on that, it would be a little bit more simple. So let's go ahead and add local date time to that. So date. And we'll do that. And of course, we can say import that. And let's just go ahead and change this to local date time so we can kind of get an idea of what we're dealing with here. All right, cool. Date time. Just like that, and we should be good to go. Okay. So we save it, we run it, and this is what we get. We get 11/11, so November 11th, 2062 at 7:35 in the morning. So that's kind of an introduction to the date time API in Java 8. There's a significant amount of stuff that you can do with it, but this is kind of your introduction to it to let you know, hey, this exists. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. You can even compare the dates if you want, like I said. But I'm leaving it up to you guys now to experiment with all the different features. I'll leave documentation down in the description below, so you guys can explore that. Also leave a couple articles down there too to get you started. And so yeah, that basically does it, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.